If your hips feel stiff or painful after being sat down, then the exercises in this video will bring some much needed relief. Hi everyone, and welcome to Exercise for Health. And stiff or painful hips can massively reduce one's quality of life, making it difficult to cope with day-to-day activities such as standing up or walking upstairs or even bending down. The hip is a ball and socket joint and therefore designed to move in many different ways, so it's crucial that we keep it mobile by moving it through flexion and extension in the sagittal plane, abduction and adduction in the coronal plane, and internal rotation and external rotation in the transverse plane. So this video will run through 6 exercises that will help improve the joint mobility or range of movement to reduce the stiffness, and 6 exercises that provide strength and stability that will help reduce the pain. And you can just pick 1 or 2 from each group that work for you. The group of mobility exercises can be done every day, and the group of stability exercises can be done on 2 or 3 days of the week. Some of the strength exercises shown use a small looped resistance band, which are pretty cheap and very versatile, so I'll leave a link in the description below to them if you don't have one. Before going through them, please note that not all the exercises will be suitable for all types of conditions of the hip, and definitely not suitable if you've recently had a hip replacement. So if you're unsure, please check with your doctor or physiotherapist first before adding any into your weekly routines. To flex and extend the hip, start on the floor in a lunge position and slide the knee backwards until it feels slightly restrictive. Bend the front knee, pushing the hips forwards, and then switch between taking your torso forwards while pushing the tailbone of your spine up in the air behind you to generate more emphasis on flexing the front hip where you'll feel stretch on your bottom. Hold for 5 seconds, then bring the torso upright, pushing the hips forwards and tucking the tailbone underneath you to generate more emphasis on extending the back hip where you'll feel a stretch on the front. Move between these 2 positions 5 times before switching the legs around to do the other side. To help open up the hips laterally, kneel on the floor and take one leg out to the side. This is the direction that your body will shift towards. As you bend the knee of that leg, ensure the knee is being squeezed back behind you to open up the hips, but you will reach a point where you'll feel a stretch in the groin. Hold for 5 seconds and then return to the start and repeat. After you've shifted your weight back and forth 5 times, switch over to the other side, and you can always hold a weight if needed to help progress the depth of the movement. To improve hip rotation, start sat on the floor with your knees bent in a 90-90 position where both knees have been dropped to one side. Then twist the torso and lean towards the front knee, keeping both knees pushed into the floor. Hold for 5 seconds and then twist your torso the other way and lean towards the back knee. This will feel much more restrictive for most people, but again, try to keep both knees down on the floor. Repeat this movement 5 times each way before switching the knees across to the other side and starting again. To focus on the muscles around the groin, start on all fours, but you may need a cushion under the knees. Then allow your knees to move further apart. Ensure the feet are directly behind the knees with the big toes down to reduce the stress on the knee joint. But if this is too uncomfortable, you can have the soles of the feet together. Then gently move the hips backwards towards the heels of the feet, keeping the spine relatively neutral. Once you have the stretch, you can drop to your elbows, and you can also gently tilt the pelvis back and forth and slowly rock the hips a bit, spending 30 to 60 seconds in this position before bringing yourself back out. You can repeat this a second time if you wish, but probably best not to do this one in a public place. If you found the last exercise too much for the knees, then this alternative may feel better. Again, start on all fours, but extend one leg out straight to the side as far as possible. You may find it more comfortable dropping to your elbows, but this will vary from person to person. Gently rock the hips back and hold for 5 seconds before returning back to the start. With the leg out straight, you may feel more of a stretch further down the inside of the leg on the adductors, rather than deeper into the groin. Repeat this movement 5 times before switching to the opposite side. The last one is circumduction of the hip, which involves all 6 movements of the hip combined. You will need to be on all fours so you can circle the knee. Initially, lift one knee up off the floor, lifting it up behind you to extend the hip, keeping the heel of that foot close to your bottom. Be careful not to overextend the hip and then arch your back, so keep the core muscles tight to restrict any spinal movement. Then externally rotate the hip slowly, bringing the knee around to the side of you, keeping it as high as possible throughout, and then lower the knee back in underneath you to start again. Repeat this movement 5 times one way and then 5 times in the opposite direction before switching to the other leg. Just ensure your arm stays straight throughout this movement and attempt to maintain a neutral spine, which is challenging. The side plank clamshell is a great exercise to improve both dynamic strength and joint stability. To enhance this exercise, it's worth having a small looped resistance band wrapped around the knees before starting. Lying on one side with the knees bent at 90 degrees and the hips flexed slightly, ensure you have the elbow directly under the shoulder. As you press the bottom knee into the ground, raise your hips up and forward slightly so your body is in alignment if looking both from the front and from the side. Once in this position, lift the top knee away from the bottom knee, pivoting on the heels of the feet, activating the muscles around the top hip, stretching the band. Hold for about 5 seconds, ensuring your body hasn't rotated, then bring the knees back together before lowering the hips back to the ground. Repeat this controlled movement 10 times before switching to the other side. The next one is a variation of a single leg glute bridge that places more emphasis on the muscles around the outside of the hip. Start with your feet together, but let one knee drop out to the side as far as possible. Then think about squeezing the top knee outwards slightly before pushing through that foot to raise the hips up. Your pelvis may be slightly angled at the top, but just ensure the knee doesn't cross the midline as though you are forcing the knees wider apart. Hold for about 5 seconds before lowering back down and repeating again until you've completed 10 repetitions, then switch to the other side. The single leg hip hinge with a kickstand will really fire up the muscles that stabilise the hip. Most of your weight should stay on the front foot, with the back foot resting on the toes a small step back. Put a slight bend in the support leg knee and then start the hinge motion as though you were pushing your bottom backwards behind you to close the kitchen drawer. When you feel tension in the hamstrings on the back of the leg, stop at that point and then bring your hips forwards and upright again. Make sure that your hips don't move out to the side as you lower down, which does mean engaging the muscles on the outside of the hip to keep everything square. Repeat the movement slowly 10 times before switching the feet over to do the other side. To make this more challenging, you can hold some hand weights or use a resistance band. Hip airplanes are a slightly more advanced exercise for the hips, but are one of the best for improving stability and reducing pain. Ideally, this should be done unaided, freestanding on one leg with the arms out to the side, hence the airplane name. But if balance is an issue for you, you can keep light contact with one finger on a support without taking too much away from the exercise. So, like with the last exercise, you will hip hinge to the start position, but allow the back foot to come off the floor so the leg is straight behind you, ideally in line with your torso. Maintain a slight bend in the support leg knee and make sure your back maintains its natural curve. Then we need to move the pelvis around the hip. Initially, open the pelvis up, twisting the body away from the support leg, but ensuring that the knee doesn't collapse inwards. When you've reached your end of range, pause for a second or two before leveling the pelvis, returning to the start, and then closing the pelvis, turning your body towards the support leg, making sure the support leg hip doesn't kick out to the side. Again, after a slight pause, bring the pelvis back level, returning to the start. Repeat this sequence 10 times before swapping over to the other leg. To do the straight leg side kick, have a small looped band wrapped around your ankles. Placing all your weight on one foot, maintain a very slight bend in that knee and do a slight hip hinge so you can look over the front knee and foot. Then slowly kick the other leg out to the side, keeping that leg straight. It's important that you don't allow the support leg knee to collapse inwards, or lean your torso away from the kicking leg, or tilt the pelvis on one side. Everything other than the kicking leg should remain still, and even though you are working the muscles around the hip that is moving the leg out to the side, you'll probably feel this more around the support leg hip, as it's working much harder to maintain stability. As with the hip airplanes, if you struggle with your balance, then stay close to a support, but try not to rely on it too much, as this will take away some of the benefit of the stability work. After completing 10 reps on one leg, switch over to the other leg for another set of 10. The final strength and stability exercise is the slow banded squat. Start with your feet set up ready to do a squat, or if you prefer a sit to stand, have the chair behind you ready. The band should be wrapped around the knees, and you begin the movement by initiating a hip hinge before bending at the knees to lower down. The aim is to slowly lower to a point just above any increase in hip pain. At this point, you will hold it for at least 5 seconds, ensuring that you keep the band under tension, activating the lateral hip muscles, and then slowly return back up to the standing start position. It's important that you hold the bottom position for an isometric hold, and this time can be increased as you progress, but the aim is to improve the depth of your squat or sit to stand before reaching any increase in pain. Ensure you keep the resistance band under tension during the movement until you complete 10 repetitions. I hope the exercises in this video help you find some hip pain relief, and I will add this to our hip condition playlist, which I'll leave a link to in the description below. If you found it useful, please give it a like by clicking the thumbs up button below, and consider subscribing if you haven't already. You can also check out the description for ways that you can help support this channel, but thank you so much for watching, and until next time, stay active and keep moving to feel better.
E